Let's get you more on that story. Bring into the conversation defence analyst Darren Olivier. Darren, welcome to the SABC News channel. So, according to this report put together by Ayanda, exclusively speaking to families of some of the South African men who are in the Donbas, their deployment to the front line is imminent. Is there any safe way out for them at the moment?
Nothing that can be done by South Africa except to appeal to the Russian government and Russian military in order to get them out, get them somewhere, for example, to Moscow, and then fly them back. So that is the only route available to South Africa at the moment in order to save them and keep them safe. There are no other options available, unfortunately.
And what would it take ultimately to convince the Russian military that they should be released? Because at this point, even their status at some point was contested. Were they mercenaries? Were they people who, as their families say, were lured to Russia or the Donbas under a false pretext?
Good question. I think, given where they are now, they are effectively mercenaries. They're being paid to be in a war. Whether they knew about it or not, that is their current status. And something that's very hard to overcome and very hard to then take a step back from. In that sense, this is going to be something that has to be handled delicately at the diplomatic level, really through probably a personal request at the between presidents. But Russia is not obliged to honor it. These men went and they were signed up somehow. It's still unclear exactly as to how they were signed up. But having been signed up, they presumably signed some sort of contract. And this really has to be a government-to-government thing now to get them out of it. Moreover, I think South Africa can probably allege a crime here in that it is illegal to recruit and staff and provide mercenaries for foreign conflicts. This is contained in the Regulation of Foreign Assistance Act from 1998. So it might, in that sense, be able to appeal in terms of saying that this is a criminal act. These men, as they claim, were lured there. And therefore, as part of an ongoing criminal investigation, South Africa requests their return.
And
so there are diplomatic approaches there.
Does the fact that South Africa enjoys a fairly good relationship with Russia guarantee them an easier exit out of this? And if so, how do you explain the fact that we've not seen it happen since the South African government issued that first statement a few weeks ago, confirming that there were these South Africans who'd issued a distress call from the Donbas, and since then we've not heard anything, at least from an official channel, about their whereabouts, their condition, and when they might be expected to return?
I think that certainly raises the question about the level of South Africa's influence towards Russia and the level to which Russia is willing to cater for these kinds of requests. One must bear in mind that although this is fairly common, of citizens from African countries being sent over there under false pretenses sometimes knowingly, and sent to the front lines, is something that's happened quite regularly and something that the Russian government seeks to downplay. They're not going to want to do anything that explicitly shows that this is happening. So they want to do so quietly. Secondarily, apart from that, it might be difficult to actually track them down, to know where they are, to know what unit has them. This is not really a fully organized thing, the way this is being handled. There are people coming from all over the world just flooding into the combat zone. This is often being done by local units without central authority. So it's not like you can just go to a database and say, hey, where are these guys? It might take some time to even track them down. So in that sense, I'm sure there's a bit of chaos involved, a bit of an issue as well. But I would say that Africa should look at this and look at the response to this as a measure of the extent to which Russia is willing to reciprocate the support that Africa has shown to it.
What sort of conditions would these men be facing in the Donbas? And when you look at their ages, they're fairly young, 20 to 39 years old are the ages we've been given at this point. And how would they be used on the front line? Would it be involvement in active combat, for instance?
Well, the conditions would be utterly horrific for both sides. These are some of the worst fighting conditions we've seen since the First World War, actually. Living in trenches, being vulnerable to drone attacks at any given moment, being sent onto, at times, suicidal assaults just to try to overwhelm the enemy and try to use up ammunition. What we have seen at times is outsider forces, whether those be Africans recruited from abroad, or prisoners, for example, or volunteers from elsewhere, have sometimes been used as frontal assaults, so sent ahead of the actual trained Russian troops, and then used as a, well, I mean, to be quite blunt, cannon fodder. So it is extremely risky for them to be there. It is very, very dangerous. And at this point, you know, I think people have heard the voice message from their purported recruiter telling them to man up and to accept what they're doing and act as soldiers. And I think that is quite disgusting, really, because these conditions are horrific.
Right.
There's no easy way to do it.
And just on that point, you're referring to a recording I think was published by Times Live in the last 24 hours ago. In the last 24 hours or so, these men were basically being told to man up, basically go out there, face your destiny, whatever it might be. I'm paraphrasing here. We've also had in the last 24 hours a complaint laid with police by a woman identified as one of former President Jacob Zuma's daughters against another daughter, Dudu Zuma Sambutla, who's accused of involvement in the recruitment of these 17 South African men. How difficult would it be to prove a direct link between recruiters, and I use recruiters quite deliberately because it would appear that there's quite a chain here from their departure in KZN. Some say there was transit through the rest of the continent before they were ultimately moved on to the Donbas. Is it something that we could track, for instance, via email, via text?
Yeah, I think there'd have to be a paper trail at some point, you know. Something I found quite curious about that voice message was the discussion about their complaints having ruined some broader plan. That in and of itself is extremely ominous. What is this broader plan? What is the purpose? Especially when you're referring to these personnel as soldiers rather than as security officers. This raises questions about, you know, whether those involved, and especially if they have links to a party in parliament, are looking to create some sort of private military force, you know, given training here, and didn't actually realize the levels of risk that are involved with people going to the front of the Donbas. But tracing this, obviously there will likely be some cutouts. There'll likely be some attempts at hiding the intent and origin. But there is ultimately still a trail there. One cannot do this quickly to move them through the continent this fast and not have, I think, fairly, I wouldn't say easily, but possibly traceable links.
Right.
And in that sense, I definitely do believe that it is possible to link those who recruited them directly to having the intent to send them to Russia.
We don't know what level of training they've received at this point, but how would they pose a security threat once they return to the country with a clear political allegiance and high-level military training?
Well, to be blunt, that's assuming that they are able to return, given the conditions in the Donbas. But if they do, yes, absolutely, especially if this was part of the plan to send many more for training. This is not something that you do for security guards. This is something that you do to train hardened, tough, and combat experienced soldiers. And that in and of itself is exceptionally worrying. It's highly disturbing. It hasn't happened in South Africa for a very long time. We certainly haven't seen any parties in parliament trying to raise their own armies. Mm-hmm. So in that sense, this is something that I think we must take extremely seriously. It must be watched closely by the police and the security services. And the story should definitely not be allowed to just sink, you know, away and die. There are many more questions to be asked about this, many more answers to be had. And I think it's really important that we get to the bottom of this.
Darren, good to talk to you. Defence analyst Darren Olivier speaking to us here on The Full View on SABC. Thank you for your time this evening.